Nigeria Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress have rejected the federal government's proposed 60,000 naira minimum wage for workers. Earlier this month, the labour unions rejected the federal government's proposal for a minimum wage of 48,000 naira. At the time, NLC President Joe Ajero stated that the administration was not serious about talking with workers. Well, on May 21, the federal government raised the planned minimum wage to 54,000 naira, which the trade union again rejected as unacceptable. Well, the labour unions have now shifted to a new minimum wage of 494,000 naira. Well, joining us now is Paul Ogwu, who is a research fellow in economic governance, Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, apparently both parties, one party is shifting ground rather very, very minimally. The other ground, the other party is saying, well, they've ceded ground too, but still some would say maybe way too high for the government to handle. But I mean, what's your take on this back and forth, and government saying, look, it's 60,000 naira, Labour is saying no, 494 is realistic?
For me, it's understandable. I mean, it's negotiation.
Right.
You have to move there and move there. So it's the government, we will have to be conscious of what they can pay. I mean, the available resources and considering some other macro and microeconomic fundamentals that is there. But Labour is equally understandable. They want a better life. They want a better minimum wage. They want a better dignity of life. They want a better labor right collectively. I mean, considering what really costs why they are agitating for that. Apart from the constitutional provision, the minimum wage act that says, so after so number of years, you have to talk about increasing their wage. But I mean, the government came in with the subsidy removal, with the floating of the naira, with the food inflation, with the high cost of living, with inflation. So it's the 30,000. It's really a living wage. Is it really something somebody can actually depend on?
But this 60,000 is Labour fighting for minimum wage? Underline that, or is Labour fighting for living wage? Because 494 looks more like living wage than the minimum wage, the barest minimum, the lowest that any Nigerian worker, should earn.
But minimum wage should be.
Does Labour understand that?
They do, because minimum wage should actually be a living wage. But while fighting for that, you should equally tell yourself the truth. Is it practicable? Is it possible? I mean, the 30,000 we've said, apart from the federal government, how many states actually comply to that? And when you look at the constitutional provision, a negotiation of minimum wage is a federal is an exclusive list, and it is equally binding on the state government. It's binding on the local government. It's binding on the organized private sector. If we're actually serious about enforcing minimum wage, nobody should earn less than that amount, 30,000 naira, in any part of the country. Apart from in the provision, they said people that are engaged in agriculture, because it's a seasonal occupation, people that engage in marine service, air services, because those ones they have international dimension to the amount you are going to collect. Apart from those, no worker should earn less than that. But ask yourself, how many states are actually complying to that?
Well, Paul, I think it's a good thing you've been able to say one thing here, because sometimes people play on words, and you punctured that minimum wage, living wage, is all the same. You have to have something that will put you in that place. But don't you think that what Labour is agitating is quite utopic? Are they taking us to a world that never does exist? Because looking at that amount, you think that can be done?
No.
That's the minimum?
It can be done. It's not feasible. It's not possible. That is the truth of the matter. I mean, we should tell ourselves the truth. I mean, when you even look at it, if you look at the books very well, even the 30,000 the federal government is paying, at times they actually borrow to pay it. Let's tell ourselves the truth. Are we really capable of paying that? Is it really possible? And even when you do that, you equally look at inflation driven by wage. I mean, increase in wage. If we do that, I mean, they are talking of that the food inflation is so high, the inflation is so high, but that will run out of reason. And ask yourself, and let's tell ourselves the truth. After 1, 2, 3 months, do you think the federal government can afford that? Considering other factors. I mean, it's not only, don't forget, which if we are doing this, like I've always argued, how many people are actually under the federal government and state payroll? How many people are actually under so there are some other factors you should consider. Look at our budget.
What factors?
I mean, it's how many people will actually benefit from that? That's, if you look at how many, do you think we have more than 10% of our population who are earning wages?
You know what, there's a question that Labour has been avoiding, and quite frankly, when they come on the show, we've asked them, they use this vague, phrase, something meaningful. So what's meaningful? So now that Labour is not here, let's see if you, as a Nigerian that has some form of expertise, can hazard a guess and say this should be something comfortable for both. Because Governor Obaseki of Edo State has set a standard at 70,000 naira, which many are saying the federal government should at least match up before you start this conversation.
I mean, interestingly, I mean, if you calculate it based on what they call cost of living adjustment, which comes from between 75,000 to 73,000 to 75,000. But we in Abuja schools, we've done some level of research and rigor, and looking at that, we'll ask ourselves, that equally, when you look at the conceptual framework, I mean, that you use in studying minimum wages, there are some, but we look at it at the, the human development approach to that. I mean, what is feasible? You look at, apart from that, if an NBS, if they are describing poverty or living wage, I mean, how much do you really need as an individual to have a life of dignity, to have a life respectable labor rights life? I mean, considering that, considering the cost of basket of food, considering how much can you really, as a human being, how much can you really earn for you to afford to live a decent life? We're no longer talking of at least eat a decent meal, take care of your basic needs. We're not talking of the luxury now. So on the average, I mean, if you can calculate that, I think if I have to guess, I mean, put a figure to that, it should be between that, as the Edo State governor said, 75,000 to 100,000. But there's another catch to it. Yeah. Don't forget, even in the Edo State, some people are saying he just said that because he's living. Do you think the governor coming in can afford that? Is it affordable for the government?
So, don't you think organized labor, including the private sector, but organized labor mainly, should be engaging the state governors, the state governments in reaching the minimum wage?
That's why
isn't that where really this fight, should be taken to?
Yeah, but that's why it's a tripartite agreement, and it's legally. I mean, it's. Any negotiation at the federal level is binding on them. I mean, it's in as much as that part of the is an exclusively that part of the Constitution. And even if you look at the Minimum Wage Act, is the government's duty to do, the Ministry of Labor and the National Wages Commission. But it's binding on the state governors.
Because, look, the different states have different capacities. Yeah. Lagos, for example, I mean, with over 20 million population and all the, added advantages that Lagos has, the oil-bearing states, they may have more capacity than some other states. Shouldn't we be looking at minimum wage from that
I think it's an ideal something if you decide to amend the Constitution and don't make it really in the concept and in the form, a federal level, where the states actually have the right to negotiate. But don't equally forget, even at that federal government level, Lagos, Rivers, and some of these states can decide on their own. If government is saying 70,000, why not we do 75 or 80,000? But when you look at, I mean, when we are saying this, you look at the budget structure of some of the states. Bayelsa, that is a small state, go and check their recurrent expenditure, and you shake your head and you find out how much some of these states are actually spending on recurrent expenditure, leaving the capital expenditure that actually affects some other people who are not part of that angle. And social expenditure,
I think
education, healthcare, and co.
And some of these small states, the monies they get from FAC is also huge
That go for paying of salaries.
in a small state. Paul Ogwu, I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
You're a research fellow in economic governance at Abuja School of Social and Political Thought.